Northern England northwards, so gardeners and growers take note. But again, it should be a lovely start to Tuesday for many places with widespread blue skies, lots of sunshine to start the day. The exception to this, the far north of Scotland, where we'll see a weak weather front bringing in cloudier skies, some showery outbreaks of rain, which as it comes south across the rest of Scotland into Northern England, tended to break up into showers. So again, a mixture of sunny spells and showers for the afternoon. Mostly fine conditions for the second half of the week for the majority of places, but
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 o'clock and this is a very special Mark Dolan tonight. In my big opinion, as Labour plan to give up to 6 million EU citizens living in Britain a vote in the general election, the message is clear. Vote Labour, get Remain. They want us back in. My Mark Meets guest is top government minister Paul Scully. I'll be asking, could a Tory civil war lose Rishi Sunak the keys to number 10? Tonight's newsmaker is Anne Widdecombe. With a number of right-wing parties,
can we not just come together? Because we're all doing the same thing. Everyone's an entrepreneur and everyone wants to do their own thing. I always say to Richard Tice and I say to David and I say to everybody, you know, we should all come together.
I'll be asking Anne, should the right unite to keep the left out of power? Plus, amid the ongoing row at ITV regarding Philip Schofield, I got a big announcement at 10, so you won't want to miss it. A busy 2 hours to come. Put something cold and fizzy in the fridge. It is Sunday night. Let's pretend we haven't got work tomorrow. And we'll kick off with the headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you very much and good evening. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. Nurses are calling for a double-digit pay offer to prevent further strike action. The head of the Royal College of Nursing, Pat Cullen, told the Sunday Times the government risks another 6 months of industrial action if negotiations aren't reopened. Members rejected a 5% offer, which was accepted by 14 other unions. A new ballot for strikes is set to be held later this month. Gatwick Airport was forced to shut a runway for almost an hour following a suspected drone incident earlier today. Flights were temporarily suspended and 12 inbound flights were diverted to other airports. British Airways says one of its flights was affected, landing at Stansted before refuelling and returning to Gatwick. A spokesperson for the airport says passengers' safety is at their absolute priority and the investigations have now been completed. Suggestions of unrest within the Conservative Party are being downplayed after the Prime Minister was blamed for the recent local election results. Rishi Sunak's facing criticism after nearly 1,000 councillors were lost and the decision to scale back post-Brexit plans to scrap EU laws. Former Home Secretary Priti Patel accused the leader of failing to listen to his party, adding the Tories hadn't covered itself in glory since Boris Johnson's leadership. Energy Secretary Grant Shapps says the Prime Minister is doing the right things and people need to be patient.
I think this, and she was referring to this set of elections, which were obviously very difficult for the Conservatives. There weren't a good set of elections for us. But this was the first opportunity people have had to comment on all the shenanigans of last summer and those many leadership changes that went on. I think people were venting their frustration. I actually think that Rishi Sunak, in his 5-point plan to halve inflation and grow the economy and reduce our debt and cut the NHS waiting list and stop the small boats, I think he's doing exactly the right things. And let's judge him against that. Let's judge this government against that when it comes to the next election.
Counting's underway in Turkey to establish who will be the country's next leader. Voters have been deciding on whether President Erdogan, who's been in power for 20 years, should be re-elected. Opinion polls ahead of the ballot gave his main rival Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu a slight lead. A clearer indication of the first-round result is expected this evening. And the Ukrainian president has received an award during his visit to Germany. He was presented with the International Charlemagne Prize of Aachen in recognition of the Ukrainian people and Volodymyr Zelensky's fight for freedom against what's been described as the unjustified Russian war of aggression. The board of directors said the award underscores the fact that Ukraine is part of Europe and the country supports the bloc's European values. Zelensky is now in France meeting with the French president. The pair are sitting down for a dinner meeting where France will reaffirm its military and humanitarian support for Ukraine. TV, online, at DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark.
Welcome to a very special Mark Dolan tonight. In my big opinion, as Labour plan to give up to 6 million EU citizens living in Britain a vote in the general election, the message is clear. Vote Labour, get Remain. They want us back in. In the big story, find out why meat may be disappearing from UK supermarket shelves. My Mark Meets guest is top government minister Paul Scully. I'll be asking, could a Tory civil war lose Rishi Sunak the keys to number 10? In my Take at 10, I'll be dealing with the World Health Organization, who have sent guidance to schools suggesting that 4-year-olds should learn about sexuality, the pleasure of their own body, and their gender identity. 4-year-olds, welcome to hell. Tonight's newsmaker is the formidable Anne Widdecombe, and I'll be asking Anne, with so many small parties emerging, should the right unite to keep the left out of power? And my Mark Dolan Tonight show is the home of the papers, always at 10:30 sharp. It's tomorrow's front pages. Some interesting lines coming in as we speak. We'll get reaction from 3 top pundits who haven't been told what to say and who don't follow the script. Tonight, Nina Mishkov, Adrian Hayes and the Right Honourable Lord Taylor of Warwick. Tonight I'll be asking the pundits, is Rishi Sunak right to stand up to woke Welby? Did the Britain-hating Eurovision star get her just desserts? And as a man is turned away from a posh restaurant for dressing too casually, has Britain gone scruffy? Plus, amid the ongoing row at ITV regarding Philip Schofield, I've got a big announcement at 10. You won't want to miss it. Plus your emails, especially the spicy ones, mark@gbnews.uk. This show has a golden rule. We don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. So, a busy 2 hours to come. Don't forget that announcement at 10. But first, my big opinion. Leaked documents suggest the Labour Party will grant the vote to potentially upwards of 6 million EU citizens living in the UK should they win power. Under the proposals, migrants who live permanently in Britain and pay tax will be able to vote in general elections for the first time. Now, I'm all for democracy and people having the vote, but it's not controversial to suggest that a general election should only be decided by the citizens of this country. I can't imagine why Labour are proposing this. I wonder if it's got anything to do with the fact that polling experts believe that most EU citizens who have settled status here, currently 3.4 million, potentially rising to 6, would vote Labour. Talk about gaming the system in your favour. Now, I'm delighted that more than double the number of people expected from the EU applied for settled status in this country, which, by the way, put paid to the ridiculous idea that there would be a mass exodus of EU citizens if we left the bloc. Quite the opposite. They stayed in order to enjoy the huge opportunities Brexit offers. They're very wise. But this policy gerrymanders our electoral system and paves the way for potentially Labour governments for the foreseeable future, particularly if the Labour Party starts showing Remainers a bit of leg and propose policies that see us head slowly but surely back into the arms of Brussels. Hardly a far-fetched scenario, given the fact that Europhile leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, campaigned for a second referendum and therefore effectively a reversal of Brexit. Pleasing a constituency of millions of EU citizens poses a clear and present danger to the whole Brexit project. With Labour likely to fare better in future elections if they promise membership of the single market, which means bringing back freedom of movement, and a customs union, which would mean bye-bye to free trade deals with the rest of the world. And another policy which might see Labour win a future election based upon these millions of pro-Brussels voters would be the promise of a referendum to rejoin. All of this is possible. So forgive me when I say that Keir Starmer's claim that this is about democracy rings a little hollow. He didn't care about democracy when he tried to reverse Brexit. And this is a leader of the opposition who hasn't ruled out a coalition agreement with the Lib Dems, a party so pro-Brussels they make ultra-EU maniac Guy Verhofstadt look like an arch-Brexiteer. And what will the Lib Dems demand for propping up a Labour government? For starters, proportional representation, which means hung parliaments forever. And secondly, they'll be pushing for closer ties with Brussels. And we know the Lib Dems would love another referendum. It's becoming increasingly possible that a vote for Labour is a vote to rejoin the European Union. Vote Labour, get Remain. EU have been warned. If you don't think the next Labour government will be the most autocratic in history, I would happily remind you of Keir Starmer's insatiable appetite for lockdowns and mask and vaccine mandates. He called those horrific school closures inevitable, and he called Freedom Day reckless. And the latest clue as to how life would be under Commander Starmer are the comments of their health spokesman, Wes Streeting. Now, I like Wes, he's a huge talent. He'd be way better than Starmer. But this is mad. He suggests that he would like to ban smoking in this country, just like in New Zealand. Now, I wouldn't say that New Zealand is the best possible role model, given that they pretty much suspended democracy and human rights during the pandemic under their totalitarian leader, Jacinda Ardern, the Kiwi Mussolini. Now, smoking is not good for you. I wouldn't recommend it. Absolutely not. And if you do want to quit, go and see your GP or buy this excellent book by Alan Carr called The Easy Way to Stop Smoking, which has helped millions. It's a truly miraculous approach. But I'm one of those people that if you tell me I can't do something, that's exactly the thing that I'm going to do. I think many of you are the same, which is why, even though I'm an avowed non-smoker, if Labour win and they try to ban smoking, I will see that as a test case for freedom. And I pledge to take up this filthy habit just to annoy them. Arrest me, why don't you? In fact, why don't I give it a go right now? Just to get some, practice under my belt. What do you think? How does this work? Mark my words, under a Labour government, our freedoms will go up in smoke. Well, let's ask you for your reaction on email, mark@gbnews.uk. What a filthy habit, by the way, but I won't be told what I can and can't consume in my own country. I'm sure you feel the same. Let me know your thoughts, mark@gbnews.uk. Also, your thoughts about Labour granting up to 6 million EU nationals the right to vote in a general election. But reacting to that, I'm delighted to welcome journalist and columnist Nina Mishkoff, author, speaker and coach Adrian Hayes, and the Right Honourable Lord Taylor of Warwick. Lord Taylor, let me start with you. Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight.
Mark, good to see you.
Your reaction to Labour's suggestion, this policy idea that's been floated, that up to 6 million EU nationals who have settled status in the UK might vote in a general election?
Well, Mark, these ideas just show that Labour are still a farce to be reckoned with. It's a cynical attempt to rig the voting system. They reckon that the EU migrants who have settled here are going to all vote Labour. It may rebound against them if this ever came into being, because those who were, for example, ruled by communists who've come to Britain may remember what it's like to be ruled by socialists and might not vote Labour. But no, this is wrong, totally wrong. And you've mentioned the fact that Starmer he's a Remainer at heart. He's not ruled out a coalition with the Liberal Democrats who want to go back into Europe. And that's what you'll get if you vote for Starmer back into Europe.
And Adrian, what he'll do is he'll have this new constituency of up to 6 million voters. And the only way to keep them happy is getting closer to Brussels.
Yeah, look, massaging the electorate is nothing new, Mark. I mean, Tony Blair unlocked the floodgates to immigration. We've had boundary changes, coalition talks, PR. So there's nothing new. I think it's dabbling the waters, just testing it out myself. But there is, you're quite right. It should be the citizens of a country that have the vote, full stop.
That's right. I mean, Nina Mishkoff, your reaction to this suggestion?
Well, you're getting quite hysterical about this, Mark. I'm getting quite worried about it. You're extrapolating way beyond.
Well, I'm trying to protect the franchise. The idea is that, it's the citizens of a country who choose the leader.
Yes, but they have chosen to be citizens of this country, and they may well try to be citizens of this country. So why shouldn't they vote for the land they have chosen?
They're migrants. They have settled status. They're not citizens.
But they may well go on to become citizens.
But not
you
yet.
don't know. But so what? So what? If they choose to live and work in a country, surely they have a right to say how that country should be run and in what way they go about their business.
They have a vote in local elections, so they can worry about the bins and that kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely. Why not?
Sure.
Why
they have that, but not a national
exactly.
election.
But why not? And the thing is, you're assuming that you were saying 6 million. It's not 6 million at the moment. That 6 million people would suddenly be voting Labour. We don't know that at all. There could be all.
Well, they'll vote for the most pro-European party, won't they? And that's not the Tories.
Well, absolutely. And look, nobody's voting Tory anyway, so that's the end of that. No, this seems to be quite extreme. And as for saying that Keir Starmer is definitely going to be going down the rejoining the EU route, he's kind of spoken out against that. He's said that he's not.
And what about this idea of autocratic rule, 5 years of nanny state Labour, banning smoking, for example?
Well, look, I'm totally for banning smoking. Smoking is the one thing. if you're lucky enough to go through life and be relatively healthy, that's fine. But if you get to a stage where you go into a hospital and go to have to see a consultant, the first thing they ask you is, do you smoke? Because smoking affects every part of our body, and there's no escaping that. And the fact that Jacinda Ardern has done that...
The Kiwi Mussolini?
I really object to that.
Dreadful woman.
My brother lives in New Zealand and does not call her that. She has done many wonderful things, and this is one of my brother is a consultant pathologist, so he sees what ends up on his slab, and many of it are smokers. It's not. The way it's being done is it's being done.
Do cops really have time to police a new law which says you can't smoke?
No, look, what happens... No, the way they're doing is that people over a certain age cannot buy... It increases each year. You can't buy cigarettes if you were born at this time, and the next year you can't buy... So it's easing it out gradually. Look, what happened with seatbelts? People made a huge fuss saying, how can you infringe our rights? We should be able not to wear seatbelts.
Seatbelts aren't addictive, Nina.
No, the thing is, they still say that will save lives, and this will save lives too.
This one's going to run and run. Your reaction to my big opinion, let me know what you think. Are you happy with the idea of smoking being banned? Do you want the government telling you what you can do and not do with your body? I think we've had 3 years of vaccine tyranny. Do we now want cigarettes taken away as well? Surely it's about personal choice. Let me know. But Nina disagrees. That's what this show is all about. Get your opinions in. Coming up next in the big story, are we on the brink of a meat shortage in UK supermarkets? This one's a shocker. I'll see you in 3.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Well, I've got to say, a big reaction to my big opinion. Labour are considering allowing up to 6 million EU nationals who live in the UK to vote in a future general election that could be decisive in terms of the outcome for many years to come. And lots of reaction on this. And I think we'll go straight to Richard, actually, very relevant. Richard says, "Hi, Mark, I've always said a Labour government would return us to Europe by stealth. However, now it seems they're shamelessly shouting it from the rooftops with bells on. Vote Labour, get Brexit bulldozed into oblivion and faith in democracy damaged forever." Richard, very elegantly put. Thank you for that. Mark says, "Hi, Mark, the only lot to blame for this mess and the possibility of a Labour Lib Dem government are the Tories, who have treated us voters with the utmost contempt. We need a new breed of government, or the country and 70% of its citizens are finished. Maybe it's too late already." Also, Labour are thinking about banning smoking, which is why I'm going to take it up. I've actually got some fags here. And, you know, I think that's quite a good look for me, don't you? It looks stylish. Humphrey Bogart. I won't light it this time. Don't want to set off the alarms or get Greg in trouble. But I've got this from John, who says, "Mark, don't start smoking, otherwise you'll end up with yellow teeth to match your tie and your watch." Oh, well spotted. Nice job there. Maureen, "Hi, Mark, please don't take up smoking. You'll smell like a dirty ashtray and ruin your good looks. Starmer government would be bad for our country under an autocratic regime. No, no, no," says Maureen. Keep those emails coming. We'll go back to politics at 10:15. Tonight's newsmaker is the indomitable Anne Widdecombe. It's time now for the big story, and shoppers and fast food customers face a shortage of home-produced chicken amid claims that supermarkets are refusing to pay farmers enough to cover soaring costs. The empty shelves and rationing of eggs and vegetables that was seen in recent months is likely to be repeated for many fresh British chicken products, according to experts at the British Poultry Council. So it seems that farmers are playing a game of chicken with the supermarkets. Who's going to win? And will Brits go hungry? Let's speak to ex-Conservative MP, good friend of the show, and highly prolific farmer Neil Parish, who's probably spent the afternoon with his arm up a Hereford. Hi, Neil.
Hello, Mark. Good afternoon. Good evening.
Your reaction to this story, it's a worry for customers, isn't it? I mean, a worry for my viewers and listeners if the supermarkets run out of chicken.
Yes, it's one of these things that can be stopped. And if the supermarkets would only pay the cost of production plus a little bit of profit for the farmers, we could have as much chicken meat if we want. But you see, the thing with chicken meat is poultry, you can finish your poultry in 6, 7 weeks. And so the cycle is very, very fast. And so if farmers are not making money, labour costs, feed costs, all very high, they are not making enough. They will not put the poultry down, grow them. And what's even worse, if you give a long period of low prices, then we don't produce as many eggs, don't hatch as many chicks. And Britain has a great poultry industry. We have really good quality poultry, good welfare standards, and it's a shame that the supermarkets won't pay enough. And I also call upon the government, because in about 3 years ago in the agricultural bill, there is legislation in there which actually can hold the retailers and supermarkets to account and actually get them to pay a fair price, because in the end the consumer may get cheaper prices now by cheap imports, but those imports will gradually disappear. We'll have lower quality, and if we're not careful, higher prices. What we need is good British chicken, and if the retailers would only pay the price, they would get them.
And why don't the retailers pay the price? Are they struggling with inflation? What's their excuse?
Yeah, I mean, I think naturally the retailers know that the consumers are having, a problem with the cost of living. But you see, we still buy very reasonable poultry in this country. For £3, £4, £5, £6, you can buy a really good chicken. It's the best value meat you will get, good welfare standards and very good quality. We use less antibiotics in the meat production in this country than in imported meat, so it's healthier to eat as well. well. So those are the reasons why you need to have it. And I think the supermarkets have decided, well, let's drive the price down. The farmers can absorb some costs. Well, yes, the farmers can absorb some costs, but once the costs get below the cost of production, you know, they even got higher labour costs at the moment, difficult to get labour as well. The same on the vegetable sector. You know, farmers won't plant vegetables if they can't get them picked, and if the retailer won't pay enough for them. So in the end, like I said, I think we want to have a fair deal here, and then, you know, the retailers would perhaps when the retailers ask the farmers, you know, to be competitive, perhaps also the retailers need to be, because you will find that retailers like Lidl and Aldi take something like 3% across the food chain, whereas Tesco's, Sainsbury's and others will take up to 7%. So I think everybody needs to look to see who's making the money here, and farmers will not produce the poultry if they're not paid enough to produce them.
Is there a danger that we will run out of chicken? Could that happen?
I think it can happen. I don't think it will, because I'm hoping that the retailers will see sense and pay the farmers a bit more. I think farmers will want to produce chicken because they're very good at it. And I think the British public want to buy a British chicken. I just think everybody wants to sort of put their heads together, be sensible about this, and stop sort of, as you said in your introduction, playing chicken with each other, because in the end, the retailers won't win this one, because farmers will just stop production, and we don't want that. The British consumer likes a good British chicken. They like British products. A lot of the big retailers like to promote British food in their shops in order to get the consumer in there. So therefore, they do actually need to pay the price. They've done it with milk and other commodities where they have decided to pay the cost of production plus. And I think on poultry and pig meat, they have never really done that. And I think there's time that they got together with the industry to make it work. And I do actually call upon the government to do a bit more rather than just stand back and let the industry and the large retailers slug it out.
To your right, Neil Parish, great to see you. Look forward to welcoming you back to the studio very soon. Neil Parish there, former Conservative MP and highly prolific farmer. Look, you're all very patriotic. If you're watching the show, you're listening to the show, and your best patriotic duty is to go out to the supermarket, to the butchers, and buy British. So British beef, British chicken, British eggs, British cheese. We just make world-class produce. And I was delighted to see that Bear Grylls, the adventurer, after years of pushing the plant-based diet, has said I was completely wrong. I felt terrible. I had no energy. And he's gone to a meat diet. So he has lovely steaks and lovely ribs and chicken breast and all the rest of it. He's never felt better. He's got his health back. So buy British and enjoy meat. There you go. That's what I think. But let me know your thoughts. Are you worried about a potential chicken shortage? Mark at gbnews.uk. Don't forget, I've got a big announcement about this morning coming at 10. The Philip Schofield drama Runs and Runs. But coming up next with the pundits, is Rishi Sunak right to stand up to woke Welby? Did the Britain-hating Eurovision star get her just desserts? And as a man is turned away from a posh restaurant for dressing too casually, has Britain gone scruffy? I'll see you in 3.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. Look, a big reaction to my discussion with ex-Tory MP and farmer Neil Parish about a potential chicken shortage, and that's because farmers are not being paid enough by the supermarkets for their produce. Good evening, Mark, says Daryl. Everyone food shopping should take a close look at the labelling on products and only buy UK-produced food. Back our farmers, back our food industry and buy British. Now, a massive reaction to my big opinion monologue, which is all about Labour and the fact that they are considering granting the vote to up to 6 million EU citizens living in the UK. At the moment, it's about 3.4 million, but could almost double once those others have settled status. Now, that would influence the outcome of many potential election results and indeed any future referenda. I think it's a slow crawl back to the EU and Brussels, but you are tending to agree and disagree. So Yvonne says, hi, Mark, one of my reasons for voting Brexit was under EU rules, the EU was going for an EU army. And I didn't want the young in my family conscripted by compulsory order. That idea has been put on hold since Brexit. Would it resurface under Labour? But Paul says that Keir Starmer has been very clear that he will not reverse Brexit. So there you go. It's all about opinions. Keep those coming. Mark at gbnews.uk, reacting to all the big stories of the day. My top pundits tonight joining us for the ringside action. Journalist and columnist Nina Mishkov. I would say legend, but she's much too young for that. Very ageing, the word legend. Author, speaker and coach, Adrian Hayes. And the Right Honourable Lord Taylor of Warwick. It's very rare that we have anyone honourable on the show. So, Lord Taylor,
we're all
dishonourable.
Aren't we honourable?
You're getting there, Adrian. Rishi Sunak has vowed to secure as many barges as it takes to house asylum seekers. Fighting back against claims it was morally unacceptable from the Archbishop of Canterbury, is the Prime Minister right to stand his ground? Is Sunak right to stand up to woke Welby? Lord Taylor.
Well, I know that the Archbishop is known by some as Wokeby rather than Welby, but I'm going to speak up for him.
I wish I'd thought of that, by the way. That's a good line.
He's a member of the House of Lords.
No one's perfect.
Absolutely. And he's entitled to speak in the debate. Historically, look at the Bible. Joseph, God-fearing man, advised the king. Daniel was prime minister in the Old Testament. Martin Luther King was really a pioneer of the civil rights movement, but he wasn't a politician. He was a pastor. Are you saying he didn't have the right to speak? So he has an opinion. You don't want to just hear from politicians on this. The Archbishop is speaking from conviction. Now, where perhaps I think he may have gone a little wrong is not providing a viable alternative, although he did say start the process of the application at the seat of origin, in the Middle East, in Syria, in Iran, in Iraq. Because, you know, the real problem is not the Archbishop. It's the fact that the Home Office has a waiting list of 100,000 cases. I used to be an immigration judge. We dealt with these cases in days. Now it takes years, and there's no excuse for this.
Adrian, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, look...
Which camp are you in, Sunak or Welby?
I'm on the Sunaks for this one. There's certain things that we don't like our royal family speaking about, our church, BBC presenters and other things. I mean, and let me put it in context. It's fine to talk about peace and stopping the war in Ukraine. It may be too political saying we should increase arms supply. It's very fine to speak about environmental, looking after the planet. We're all environmentalists, but climate change and net zero is very political. And the same thing on immigration. It'd be fine for the Archbishop to talk about, look, let's look at the causes of immigration, or migration and the big picture, but actually directing against a very political point about the illegal immigrants coming across the Channel gets him into hot water. And I think the danger for the Archbishop is you lose your trust, the same as the royal family would, the same as BBC presenter, but you lose your trust with your flock. And I think he needs to be sort of very careful about how politicised he goes.
Well, Nina, I wonder whether Archbishop Welby has presented Rishi Sunak with an opportunity, because it allows Sunak to say, I'm going to stand my ground and I will stop those boats, which is an aspiration of the majority of voters.
Well, it allows Rishi Sunak to say what he likes, basically. I mean, the thing is, he's got these 5 promises, and the boats being the the 5th promise. It doesn't actually... I just heard a political pundit saying it doesn't actually matter what your 5 points are, as long as you've got 5 points and you have a plan. The thing is, but with Welby, is that if he can't speak out on this, what can he... What else is he there for? I mean, he's a man who can speak out on spiritual matters.
He can say things like Britain should welcome refugees, which we do, as much as we can. But by challenging the Stop the Boats policy, then he's essentially siding with those criminal gangs who are essentially people traffickers.
No, he's not.
He was saying that the policy is not workable.
He's saying the policy is not workable. But also, he also made this ridiculous thing. He'll have as many barges as it takes. Now, a barge holds 500, and if there were 45,000 last year, that means 90,000 barges. So let's not, let's examine what he's saying. The point is, you're quite right, John, that there must be a means of servicing these people, putting them through the process in the countries where they are. We don't have only for Hong Kong and Ukraine and Afghanistan, I think.
Just 3.
But everything
we need
else,
more safe routes.
You have no choice. And people say, well, why did they come to... They're perfectly safe in France. France takes way more than we do. They are perfectly entitled to come because part of the European Convention is that they are allowed to travel through as many countries until they get to the country they want.
Briefly, Adrian?
But no, I'm with Mark on this one, because the Archbishop's main thrust is immoral, inhumane. It wasn't about the practicality. We can all agree that the practicality of this policy may not be workable, but that's his main thrust. And, and I agree with what Mark's saying. You're siding with criminal gangs on this.
You are not siding. We're also talking about the Rwanda policy. We're not just talking about...
There are more journalists that have gone to Rwanda than refugees.
Well, it hasn't happened at the moment. Rwanda is clearly not going to be accommodating tens of thousands of individuals. But the idea is... once it happens, and I'm not saying it will work, but if it does happen, it will be a disincentive to those criminal gangs.
You've got to cut the business case.
You say that, but at the moment there are only room in hotels with 200 or 300 people. Now, once they get those 200 or 300 people there, then it's no longer a deterrent.
Well,
and if it's such a fabulous place as we keep being told, it's not a deterrent anyway.
Net migration of 500,000 last year, potentially 1 million this year. The British people have had enough.
Yes, but that's not migrants that come on boats.
OK, well,
that is illegally done through the visa system.
I wonder whether we should send the Eurovision contender for the UK to another country. I wonder whether she should be processed in Rwanda, because with Eurovision finally concluding last night, the UK's representative May Muller made headlines, but not for her performance. The 25-year-old was called out for tweeting, "I hate Britain." So, did the Britain-hating Eurovision star get her just desserts? Lord Taylor?
Well, I only saw bits and pieces of this contest. I think it should be renamed the Eurovision Thong Contest when you look at some of the outfits. No, this young lady was very foolish in what she tweeted in a couple of years ago, I think, and I'm amazed
3
that
years ago. It was
3 years ago.
It was 2020, and as far as I can tell, she tweeted it as a kind of protest against Boris Johnson and the Conservative government and the state of Britain under Boris. And I don't know many people who would disagree with her.
But is somebody that tweets, "I hate Britain," the right person to represent this country in any competition?
For heaven's sake.
It's not. But
she's a young girl.
I don't think we
She's
can...
an adult. She's 24.
Let's put in this in context. I mean, yeah, her tweet was foolish, irresponsible, whatever. She shouldn't perhaps have represented Britain. But I just think the song wasn't good enough. Perhaps
her performance was
wasn't
not that
good enough.
good, no.
But I did think, Mark, I did think we used to have, you know, the whole of Europe voted against the UK, but Sam Ryder proved us wrong last year.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
The point is, if you've got a good song and a great singer, which he is, we can win it.
Well, briefly, Adrian, does that prove, because Sam Ryder came second last year, we would have won it if it wasn't for Ukraine, and fair enough that they got it, and rightly so. But did Britain's success last year prove that the world has forgiven us for Brexit?
I don't think they punished us for Brexit. I mean, if you go back in time... No.
Nina.
Seriously, it's not that. Because if it's a really good song, you look at Conchita the other year, that Rise Like
I think in the first couple of years after Brexit, we had no chance. You could have put Paul McCartney and Elton John in a duet, and we'd have come bottom.
Did you see the candidate we put up, I think, 3 years ago, before the lockdowns? I mean, just embarrassing. You know, we can't just use that as an excuse. We just have to be better.
Well, I do. Props to you.
Terrific people this year.
Props to you, because you know your onions when it comes to showbiz and entertainment. You've, I'm sure, reported on the Eurovision Song Contest on many occasions. So Nina knows her stuff on that one. Last but not least, a woman was left mortified after a hotel's restaurant staff turned away her husband for dressing too casually over the coronation weekend. The woman claims the restaurant manager said his shoes were inappropriate, despite the fact that the couple forked out £300 for an overnight stay. But has Britain gone scruffy?
Yes.
Nina?
Yes, the trouble with lockdown was that everybody stayed at home in their pyjamas or their horrible jogging bottoms, you know, stained jogging bottoms, sort of repulsive garments that shouldn't be seen off a sports field.
Yeah.
And people just got slobby, got even slobby.
Greg, can you get a team to go into the dressing room, get a tie for Adrian, please?
Yeah,
I've got loads of ties in a bag.
I'm glad the House of Lords
can we get a tie? Grab a tie.
We're keeping the dress sense up. Mark, I'm all for... I've been to places where I've been refused entry because of a tie, but most restaurants, most clubs now have got spare ties. Not sure about spare shoes if you've got the wrong ones, but they're a little bit more flexible. But I'm all for dress codes in certain establishments.
Yeah. And he was wearing... He said they were £150 leather sliders. Well, that's sandals.
Yeah.
And you don't wear that to dinner
These,
at night.
I mean, talk about Labour banning cigarettes. I'd be tempted to ban sliders. They're an abomination.
But the restaurant surely could have lent him a tie and a jacket.
No, he
was a paying guest.
It was his feet.
Yes, but his feet... Nobody looks at your feet.
No, but you don't... I do not want to have dinner next to some man.
There was hardly anyone in the restaurant.
Well, let me tell you, if you are going out for dinner with Nina Mishkov, you'd better smarten up. We've got lots more to come. I'm delighted to say my Mark Meets guest is top government minister Paul Scully. I'll be asking, could a Tory civil war lose Rishi Sunak the keys to number 10? That's next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former Government Minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Is Rishi Sunak right to stand up to woke Welby over Stop the Boats? Helen says, Mark, your guest Nina is talking out of her backside. Does she know how big France is compared to our tiny island? She's the problem, and people like her enabling illegal migrants. Keep those emails coming. It's time for this. Yes, it's time for Mark Meets, and this evening, one of the most liked and respected politicians of his generation, the Conservative MP for Sutton and Cheam, and the Minister for London, as well as Minister for the Tech and Digital Economy, Paul Scully. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Mark. How are you? I can't beat that introduction. Thank you so much. It's been a long time.
Great to have you on the show. Happy memories of appearing on Julia Hartley-Brewer's breakfast show with you at some ungodly hour. I got to know you very well, and you've ascended into the political stratosphere since. You've been, among your many accolades, you've been deputy chairman of the Conservative Party, appointed by Boris. Very difficult on May the 4th, a trouncing at the polls. Is a Tory win next year now beyond reach?
No, it's not beyond reach. It was a really difficult day, though. If you look at the fact that we've had a difficult year last year, we've had a lot of change last year. People are obviously really concerned. They want stability. Rishi Sunak has come in. He's had his 5 measurable outcomes that he wants out of halving inflation, growing the economy, reducing the debt, stopping the boats, and indeed cutting the backlog in the NHS. They're all measurable. But of course, he's only a quarter of the way through that because he's only a few months into the job. And so let's see at the end of the year. People are at the moment still really unsure, but there's plenty of way to go.
There's talk potentially if Labour weren't able to get across the line with a majority, if they were the largest party, they might enter a coalition with the Lib Dems. What would be the implications of that in your view?
Well, I mean, the Lib Dems have got a reputation in Parliament of saying one thing in locally, another thing doing something nationally. And so they will, I think, suit them, whatever the mood is at the time to make sure they can get a job at the top table. What you then find is that coalitions and the promises all happen after the election. So actually the voters are voting on one thing, they'll actually get something else. Clearly, we risk what happens with Brexit. The Lib Dems will be pushing them to do something on that. The Lib Dems will be pushing them to do something on electoral reform as well, proportional representation. So there are some big constitutional issues that are likely to come back to us should that scenario happen.
Now, you've got a revered title. You are Minister for London, which is, of course, one of the greatest cities in the world. But I want to talk about the whole of the UK. This is GB News. London has led the way with low traffic neighbourhoods and ultra-low emission zones. It's very controversial. It's happening elsewhere in the country. What's your view of it?
Well, I can tell you the London experience, and the ultra-low emission zone in the centre of London worked because you've got a really viable alternatives in public transport if you're in the West End or something like that. And that might happen in the very centre of some other cities, but that are so much smaller than London. What you then get, though, very quickly as you move further out of towns and cities, and that's very much the case in London, when you get to the suburbs, it's just really difficult to get around. It might be one thing getting in and out, but getting around. So you're punishing people that are low paid, people that are running small businesses, people that are running charities who just have no other alternatives. So I'm absolutely pushing the mayor to scrap the ULEZ extension to outer London, and I'd ask people, around the country to look very carefully at the costs versus the benefits. We all want to breathe clean air, clearly, but there's other ways of doing it.
Now, Paul, you said that you're considering running for London Mayor. Can you give us an exclusive tonight? Will we have Mayor Scully in City Hall this time next year?
Well, look, I can't give you an exclusive tonight, Mark, much as I'd love to. I'm still, lots to think about, and I'm still doing the day job, so I've got to get that done because what I don't want to do is confuse the two. But look, I just talked about ULEZ. We've got a mayor that's failing. He's not building enough houses. And so young people can't even get on the renting ladder, never mind the housing ladder. We've got the Met Police in special measures, the Fire Brigade in special measures, and people are finding it really difficult with TfL in such dire straits financially to get in and around London. So there's so much to do that the mayor is just wagging his finger and he's diverting, deflecting rather than delivering. That's what's really driving me to take this really seriously.
What do you make of these so-called 15-minute cities and the war on motorists? Many of my viewers and listeners are not happy. Do you think this government should be pushing back on that? And if you were to be London Mayor, would you push back on that kind of approach for the capital?
You shouldn't have a war on the motorists. You shouldn't have someone forcing you to push you into a corner in that kind of situation. I think having a planning, a strategic plan for your town or your city when you've got enough facilities around you to better work from home, better shop locally, and those kind of things, that's fine. That's one thing. That's strategic thought. But actually forcing people into these kind of scenarios is totally unacceptable. Devolution is a good thing, but local politicians have got to be held accountable for what they're actually doing and what they're deciding on.
And Paul, what's your story? You're highly educated, you're a successful entrepreneur, you've run lots of small businesses. I understand your father's family was originally from Burma, so it's been quite the journey for the Scullys.
Yeah, my dad was Burmese, my grandfather Burmese, my grandmother Indian from Calcutta, and he came over here, completed his apprenticeship on the docks in Glasgow, having started in Rangoon. Unfortunately, something killed him a few years later because he got asbestosis when I was around 30 odd years ago. But he was a successful engineer, and he did what a lot of people from that part of the world did. He believed in education, hard work, family networks as well, and really instilled that in me. And I think all the time how proud he would have been when he was cycling around central Rangoon to think that his son was now representing British constituency. So I'm really proud of that, proud to be part of that melting pot that's London, actually, because we often talk about diversity, but with me having the product of a mixed marriage with my mum from Nottingham, I think that's probably representative of sort of second, third, fourth generations now in London's and big cities like that.
Well, definitely. Look, can I ask you about this growing civil war within the Tory party? Could it lose Rishi Sunak the keys to number 10? You've got Priti Patel complaining about Sunak's policies. You've got my friend Jacob Rees-Mogg at war with the PM over tax rises. This is not a very united party, is it?
I don't think it's a civil war, Mark. I think that's probably overblown. I think people are obviously still really concerned after the local election. I talked about the turbulence of last year, and there's still the battle for ideas. And the Conservative Party is a broad church. When you have the sort of the centre left of the party and the further to the right, you've got some quite big differences there. But actually, what we tend to find is that we settle those before elections. I talked a little bit earlier about what happens after an election if you go into coalition. I think people, we all settle on a manifesto that we're going to be fighting this next election. But it's right that Rishi is pushed. I think nobody minds scrutiny, nobody minds good debate, as long as it's sensible, constructive, and we do rally around a common purpose, because that's what people want to see at this moment in time. And I know Rishi is actually, the Prime Minister is absolutely dead set on fulfilling those 5 outcomes that I talked about, and we should all rally around that.
Paul Scully, more power to you if you do run for mayor. Great to have you on the show. We'll catch up soon. Conservative MP and Minister for London, Paul Scully. Here's the poll. Could a Tory civil war lose Sunak? Number 10, 85% say yes. Coming up next, this is the big one, folks, in my take at 10. I'll be dealing with the World Health Organization, who have sent guidance to schools suggesting that 4-year-olds should learn about sexuality, the pleasure of their own body, and their gender identity. Are you a little boy or are you a little girl? Welcome to hell. Plus, I've got an extraordinary announcement to make. Don't go anywhere.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
It's 10 o'clock, and this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, I'll be dealing with the World Health Organization, who have sent guidance to schools suggesting that 4-year-olds should learn about sexuality, the pleasure of their own body, and their gender identity. 4-year-olds. Are you a little boy? Are you a little girl? You get to decide. Welcome to hell. Tonight's newsmaker is Anne Widdecombe with a number of right-wing parties.
Can we not just come together? Because we're all doing the same thing. Everyone's an entrepreneur and everyone wants to do their own thing. I always say to Richard Tice, and I say to David, and I say to everybody, we should all come together.
I'll be asking Anne Widdecombe, should the right to unite to keep the left out of power? That's right, should the right unite to keep the left out of power? Mark Dolan Tonight is the home of the papers, with tomorrow's front pages at exactly 10:30 sharp. Some great stories coming in as we speak. Plus, amid the ongoing row at ITV regarding Philip Schofield, I've got a big announcement. That's coming right up. First, the headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Mark, thank you very much. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Nurses are calling for a double-digit pay offer to prevent further strike action. The head of the Royal College of Nursing, Pat Cullen, told the Sunday Times the government risks another 6 months of industrial action if negotiations aren't reopened. Members rejected a 5% offer, which was accepted by 14 other unions. A new ballot for strikes is set to be held later this month. Gatwick Airport was forced to shut a runway for almost an hour following a suspected drone incident earlier today. Flights were temporarily suspended and 12 inbound flights were diverted to other airports. British Airways says one of its flights was affected, landing at Stansted Airport before refuelling and returning to Gatwick. A spokesperson for the airport says passenger safety is the absolute priority and the investigations have now been completed. Suggestions of unrest within the Conservative Party are being downplayed after the Prime Minister was blamed for the recent local election results. Rishi Sunak's facing criticism after almost 1,000 councillors were lost and the decision to scale back post-Brexit plans to scrap EU laws. Former Home Secretary Priti Patel accused the leader of failing to listen to his party, adding the Tories hadn't covered itself in glory since Boris Johnson's leadership. While their Energy Secretary Grant Shapps says the Prime Minister is doing the right things and people need to be patient.
I think this, and she was referring to this set of elections, which were obviously very difficult for the Conservatives. There weren't a good set of elections for us. But this was the first opportunity people have had to comment on all the shenanigans of last summer and those many leadership changes that went on. I think people were venting their frustration. I actually think that Rishi Sunak, in his 5-point plan to halve inflation and grow the economy and reduce our debt and cut the NHS waiting lists and stop the small boats, I think he's doing exactly the right things. And let's judge him against that. Let's judge this government against that when it comes to the next election.
Well, counting continues in Turkey to establish who will be the country's next leader. Voters have been deciding on whether President Erdogan, who's been in power for 20 years, should be re-elected. Opinion polls ahead of the ballot gave his main rival Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu a slight lead. A clearer indication of the first-round result is expected this evening. And the Ukrainian president has received an award during his visit to Germany. He was presented with the International Charlemagne Prize of Aachen in recognition of the Ukrainian people and Volodymyr Zelensky's fight for freedom against what's been described as the unjustified Russian war of aggression. The board of directors said the award underscores the fact that Ukraine is part of Europe and the country supports the bloc's European values. Zelensky's been meeting with President Emmanuel Macron. They've been sitting down for a dinner where they've been discussing the military and humanitarian support for the war-torn country. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark.
Thanks, Tatiana. We'll see you at 10. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. In tonight's Newsmaker with former Cabinet Minister Anne Widdecombe, should the right unite to keep the left out of power? Mark Dolan tonight is the home of the papers with tomorrow's front pages, live and uninterrupted at 10:30 sharp. Plus, we'll have tonight's headline heroes and back page zeros. So, big stories, big guests, and always big opinions. Let's start with my take at 10. How about this for an absolute shocker? The Telegraph report that the World Health Organization, who gave us disastrous COVID lockdowns, who sided with China over the lab leak theory, and hopped into bed with obese health guru Bill Gates to roll out vaccine tyranny, now think that 4-year-olds should learn about sex, masturbation, the pleasure their own body can give them, and reflect on what their gender identity might be. 4-year-olds! This is all part of the terrifying woke movement which has infiltrated our politics, the media, corporations, and our public institutions. At the extreme end, and I'm not making this up, there are figures on the hard progressive left who think paedophiles should be renamed as minor attracted adults for their dignity and their understanding. You heard me right. And whether it's provocative sexualized drag show acts in primary schools, or male woodwork teachers in Canada with their fake tits pouring out all over the place, it seems that woke ideology is deeply perverted and seeks to effectively groom tiny children into questioning whether they are a boy or a girl and sexualizing them from the age of 0. That's right, I kid you not, the WHO guidance to schools, God help us, says that sexuality education starts from birth. If you don't think that's sick, if you don't think that's disgusting, if you don't think that should be illegal, then I can't help you. The World Health Organization can go to hell. There's trouble in paradise, folks. TV dream team Philip Schofield and Holly Willoughby are at war, with the talented Willoughby, we're told, having severed all ties with Schofield on social media. And they are apparently barely on speaking terms. This duo have limped from one scandal to another, and the blame lies squarely with Phil. There was Schofield's outrageous rudeness to the wonderful Ruth Langsford when he cut her off mid-flow whilst she was promoting loose women. The debacle over his brother's conviction for paedophilia, not his fault, of course, but a scandal nonetheless. There was the PR disaster of Q-Gate, in which TV's golden couple were claimed to have jumped the queue to see the Queen's coffin. And Schofield's hurried announcement about his sexuality. Many in the gay community and the wider public were not particularly impressed by his sudden bravery, with most sympathising not with Schofield, but his poor, long-suffering wife, who we understand knew nothing about his double life. It came at exactly the same time that many stories were swirling around about Philip and his robust appetite for young men. And there was the mysterious departure of a production assistant from This Morning in 2020, as reported in the Mail Online today. ITV is in crisis. This whole story threatens not just the great franchise of This Morning, but the network's wider reputation. I don't want to see that happen. ITV is a great British brand, and I like solutions, not problems. So I've got a plan to save ITV and This Morning. I've cleared this with the bosses here at GB News. Given the fact that should the pair front the programme tomorrow, which I'm told they will, it will be the most excruciating bit of telly you've seen since Davina McCall's chat show. So I'm prepared to make ITV an extraordinary offer. I will present the show tomorrow alongside Willoughby. I can talk about swimsuits and stuff. I've got loads of opinions, makeup, cooking. Of course, I'll maintain my duties here at GB News, and I always will. But as this is akin to a public national emergency, I think it's only right that I step in temporarily to steady the ship. Ratings won't be a problem. I'm delighted to say that our numbers go from strength to strength on Mark Dolan tonight, and I'm normally beating Sky News about now. So the offer stands. I am willing to present this morning with my fee going to charity Help for Heroes. This is not a drill. The offer is a firm one. Oh, and if I do have to use Schofield's dressing room, make sure it's been disinfected first. ITV, it's over to you. I've cleared it with the bosses. We have the best management team in the country. And I'm happy to go over to ITV Studios tomorrow. I'll present the show. I will settle everyone's nerves and bring a bit of sanity back to the madness over at ITV. Let's get reaction now from top showbiz journalist Nina Mishkov. She's one of my pundits tonight. And listen, Nina, you've covered some of the biggest entertainment and showbiz stories the country's ever seen. You've been at The Sun, you've been at every significant national newspaper and magazine. First of all, your reaction to my extraordinary offer to the channel, to ITV.
I think they'd be mad not to take you up on it. Seriously, you know, when a presenting pair fall out with each other, it is absolute disaster. I mean, there were days where Eamon Holmes and Anthea Turner, and he eventually in public called her Miss Tippy Princess Tippy Toes, I think it was. I mean, you could cut the atmosphere with a knife. And, you know, there are actually many sort of partnerships that look fine on screen, but below the surface, they are dreadful, and it can't go on. And it seems to me that ITV is gunning for Philip, and you know, I can't see how that can ever survive now that all this has come out. So you may well be in with a chance, Mark.
Yes, well, of course, I'm firmly committed to GB News, but I think it's a national crisis, and I'm happy to step in, partly, Nina, to prevent viewers from having the excruciating discomfort of watching those two on the sofa together, pretending to be best mates.
Well, the thing is, once the news is out, the viewers are watching for any little sign. You know, oh, look, he looked away, or he didn't look at her, or you could, you know, all of that. Any little twitch or inflection is going to be, you know, fodder. So really, I don't think there's any way back now.
No, Nina, you know telly inside out. How long's he got?
Oh, I think it's going to be very quick, actually.
Right. OK, fascinating stuff. You heard it here first. Nina Mishkov thinks that the departure of Philip Schofield is a matter of perhaps days rather than even weeks. Let's now get reaction to this story. The World Health Organization. It sounds like a made-up story, like April Fool's, doesn't it? Lord Taylor, 4-year-olds being taught sexuality, masturbation, and whether you're a boy or a girl, aged 4.
Well, when I was growing up, I was a great admirer of WHO. I mean, The Who was a fantastic rock group. Roger Daltrey and, you know, Pete Townsend on guitar. That album, Tommy, is one of the best of all time. But as for the World Health Organization, which presumably has stolen the title from the rock group, it's dreadful. It's awful. We don't want 4-year-olds not knowing if they're Arthur or Martha. This is dangerous advice. I would actually close down the WHO and listen to The Who instead.
Yeah. What a great idea. Put Roger Daltrey in charge of World Health. He's great for our mental health with his music. Adrian Hayes, I felt as I told my viewers and listeners about that these words aren't real, but they came out of my mouth. 4-year-olds being asked if they're a boy or a girl.
Look, let me put a context. I've been saying for quite a while now, the last couple of years, we're less a battle in political schemes versus left versus right, and much more with a top versus down. When I mean top versus down, bottom, I mean progressiveness versus common sense, elites versus the normal people, and authoritarianism versus freedom. And I think the WHO and WWF are just the worst manifestations of all of these things. This is a corrupt organisation that is really highly influenced by China, highly funded by Gates, and I think we should have nothing to do with it. And I'd give one thing for Donald Trump, who said he was going to withdraw from WHO. I would like Rishi Sunak, a Conservative Party, to actually say we're going to withdraw from this, particularly their pandemic preparationist treaty, the one that's come in, which is being signed away without any protest at all, and giving, you know, subjugating our sovereignty to an elite body which has got no one's interested at heart. This is an evil move, and I think there should be a safeguarding issue put against the WHO.
Most certainly. And I understand we give £100 million a year to the WHO. Do you think that should be stopped immediately, Nina?
Well, no, because a lot of the work they do is good. I mean, I am far more anxious that we should be focusing on the health, the sexual health of our slightly older school children.
Sure.
I mean, the proliferation of porn. There seem to be no, once you have a mobile phone, that's it. There seem to be no curbs on that. And that is causing so much more harm and damage to our young people than anything that you're talking about now. It's unbelievable. Young girls are subject to all sorts of pressures at school from young boys who have been blighted by their exposure to porn. They're blunted by their exposure to porn. And I would much rather see that we focus on somehow containing that, because it leads on to all sorts of problems for young women in the wider world.
OK, well, the WHO do important...
No, but I'm talking about it.
The WHO do important work, says Nina Mishkov. Your reaction, Mark, at gbnews.uk. We've got the papers at 10:30. Next up, tonight's newsmaker is the formidable Anne Widdecombe, the original dropper of truth bombs. And I'll be asking Anne, with so many small parties emerging, should the right unite to keep the left out of power? And here's a question for you. Should women who want to raise their children at home get tax breaks to do just that? I'll be asking Anne next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, I've made an extraordinary offer to ITV. We can all agree that if Holly and Phil present This Morning tomorrow, it's going to be excruciating telly. So I've risen to the occasion, the man, the moment. I have spoken to my bosses and I have their permission temporarily to step into the hot seat on ITV this morning and present the show tomorrow. I'll get an early night and I'll get straight in, and I'll probably wear this tie because I think you'll agree it brings my eyes out. A massive reaction on email. I'll just quickly get to a couple. Jax says, Mark, what a delight that would be to see you on Breakfast TV instead of Schofield. They'd be mad not to take your offer. Go for it, Mark, says Adrian. Give them a good kicking and show them what good journalism is. You have my support. Don't forget, it's temporary, and my fee will go to charity, and I've chosen Help for Heroes. This is not a drill. ITV, over to you. It's time now for The Newsmaker, in which a fearless commentator speaks out on the big stories of the day. And tonight's Newsmaker is former Home Office Minister, best-selling author and television personality Anne Widdecombe. With pollsters predicting either a Labour majority or a hung parliament with Labour as the largest party, with Keir Starmer supported by votes from the Liberal Democrats, should the right unite to keep the left out of power? With the likes of Reform UK, the Heritage Party, UKIP and Reclaim, it seems a new centre-right party is born every 10 minutes. Is this counterproductive? Will it backfire? Do they need to come together, as the star of GB News, Lawrence Fox, has said earlier today? Anne, you're officially supporting Reform UK. What's your view?
Well, of course, it would be wonderful if all the right could come together, but that is cloud cuckoo land. That is not going to happen. You've got your usual business of personalities, different agendas, different priorities, all the rest of it. I would very much like the right to come together, but, I'm a realist and I work in the real world. And I think of them all, Reform has the best chance, which is why I have joined Reform. Of course, what should happen, and certainly what won't happen, is that the right of the Conservative Party, which is no longer a right-wing party, it isn't centre-right, it's a left-wing party. We have two parties in this country. One is red, one is pale pink. We do not have a truly Conservative party. Now, if the Conservative wing of the Conservative Party broke off and joined a centre-right party, such as Reform, then I think there would be some chance. But of course they won't, because they want to hold on to their seats. So, we just have to be realistic about it.
And do you think the Conservatives face an existential threat in the long term?
Oh, I think the Conservatives are toast as far as the next election goes. And then, of course, the question is how they react to that. And whether they see that as a reason to get together and unite, or whether they all blame each other for what has happened. And if I had to put money on it, I would expect them to start blaming each other, because that is what they have spent the last 3 years doing, and squandering a huge majority, squandering a huge vote of public confidence. That's what they've spent 3 years doing. Don't tell me they're suddenly going to get a rush of common sense.
There's always going to be a gap in the market, an audience. There's always going to be support for a centre-right party. After all, Anne, as you know, the Conservatives are the most successful political party in the history of European democracy. So if they were to dwindle, to fall away, do you think Reform UK could fill the gap?
Well, I'm certain that it could, but again, I'm a realist. I don't expect that to happen, in the next 5 minutes. I don't expect it to happen by Tuesday afternoon. We have quite a long slog ahead. But nevertheless, people are talking to me all the time and are saying, oh, yes, we like what Reform is saying. They may not necessarily have joined the Reform Party, but they like what we're saying. And that is a very major start. Now, I joined the Brexit Party very late in the day. We had that enormous success. We swept the board in the European elections in 2019, became the largest party in the European Parliament from nothing. From nothing, because people liked what we are saying. And that is the challenge for the Reform Party between now and the next election, to get people to move from liking what we're saying to liking it so much that they vote for us.
Anne, let me bring you up to speed on a story we covered yesterday, and we broke the internet with this story. Civil servants are advising prison officers not to call inmates convicts, as it may hurt their feelings or offend them. As a former prisons minister, what's your view on this?
Well, it's a complete nonsense. Convict is a statement of fact. If you have been convicted of a crime, you are a convict. And if you're serving a prison sentence, you are a convict. And so, I mean, it's no more than a statement of fact. But what I can't believe is, using time that way when there are so many things that need addressing in the prison service. What are they doing? Wasting their time devising, correct language when what they should be doing is promoting proper educational and work regimes in prisons, promoting offending behaviour courses, getting the security right, getting extra prison places to meet the overcrowding crisis. Those are the things they should be concentrating on. Why are they worried about whether a convict is called a convict?
Last but not least, Anne, Conservative MP Miriam Cates has said that women who want to stay at home and raise their kids should be incentivised to do so. She's suggesting tax breaks for stay-at-home mums. Would you support such a move?
Well, what we do know is that there is gross inequality and has been for a long time. You get a situation where you have two earners in a household. They both go out to work. They get subsidised childcare. They get all those allowances. The family where they stay at home, where the mother or the father stays at home, and they live on one income, have to subsidise those people with their taxes, which is gross. And my view has been for a very long time that we need complete equality, that the state doesn't promote either going to work or staying at home, and that it doesn't give breaks for either, that it's complete equality and what you do is down to you. Now, I have said that for very many years. Cameron and Osborne were determined that no woman should stay at home, that they should all go out to work. Well, and of course they imagined that women going out to work were a bit like Samantha Cameron, and going to these high-powered jobs. For an ordinary woman with children, going out to work probably means slogging away, packing peas in the local factory. It's just not glamorous.
Anne, I know you're on the move today, and may I humbly say you look fabulous tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Former government minister, best-selling author, television personality Anne Widdecombe, who returns in a week's time. I say in an hour's time, if only. Headliners is happening next, by the way. Coming up, we've got the papers with full pundit reaction, including tonight's headline heroes and back page zeros. That's in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's exactly 10:30. Let's have a look at tomorrow's papers hot off the press. Thank you to Sophia for bringing those in hot foot, as well as Grace. I've got a brilliant team today, by the way. Greg knocking it out the park. Alistair in my ear. What a show. Dream team. Let's have a look at The Guardian. And they lead with the following. Braverman rejects Tory calls to ease visa rules. Home Secretary says that she will not budge on the idea of making any changes to visa rules that could increase immigration into the country. Mo moved to tears, BAFTA TV win for athletes documentary. Also, NHS privacy fear after doctor shares records. The confidentiality of NHS medical records has been thrown into doubt after a stalker hospital doctor accessed and shared highly sensitive information about a woman dating the doctor's ex-boyfriend. The victim was left in fear, shock and horror when she learnt her information had gone public. OK, next up, we've got the I newspaper. Sunak under pressure to get tougher on migrants. Braverman tells Tories it's not racist to control our borders. Metro, nurses give Sunak the double digits. Nurses will strike until Christmas unless they get a double-digit pay rise. Pat Cullen, the leader of the nurses' union, whose members have already rejected a 9% deal, have warned the PM, we may personally have underestimated the members and their sheer determination. OK, well, look, we'll probably come to that in just a moment. The Financial Times, if we've got it, folks. A lot of it's financial goings on, but let me give you an international news story. G7 and EU to heap pressure on Russia with ban on reopening of gas pipelines. Daily Express, outrage over Labour plan to reopen Brexit. Now, this ties in with my big opinion, which you can catch up on online at GB News on Twitter. Keir Starmer is accused of trying to drag Britain back into the EU with his plan to give millions of its citizens the vote. Leading Tories claimed the Labour leader was preparing a sinister plot and was rigging the system in order to hold another referendum on membership of the bloc. Very much the theme of tonight's Big Opinion. Do check it out on Twitter or on YouTube, by the way. Daily Mail now. Starmer to use EU's citizens to rig polls. That story appearing also in the Mail. Sir Keir Starmer was tonight accused of a cynical plot to rig future elections by giving millions of EU citizens and teenagers the right to vote. And Daily Star. Scandi chill, then heatwave. Summer on hold. Summer won't fully hit until next month due to a Scandinavian shiver, according to forecasters. But then, 27 degrees. Time to get the shorts out and reopen that summer wardrobe. Can't remember what mine even looks like or where it is. Let's get reaction now to tomorrow's front pages in the company of our wonderful pundits. And I'm delighted to have journalist and columnist Nina Mishkoff, author, speaker and coach Adrian Hayes, and the Right Honourable Lord Taylor of Warwick. And Adrian, this is a concern, isn't it? The suggestion in the Guardian newspaper and the Metro that these strikes on the part of the nursing unions could go on till Christmas.
What do I think about it? Very sensitive topic. You know, we all love our nurses, but I've said it before on the show. I think perhaps we idolise our nurses more than the porters, the radiographers, the cleaners, the cooks and everything like this. So this has got to end. Sorry, there isn't the money. We're spending far more than we can survive, living beyond our means as a government. It has to be resolved.
So you think 9% plus that one-off payment that's been promised is enough?
It's more than enough. Sorry.
Okay. Nina Mishkov.
Well, the trouble is that the government has been playing hardball all the time with the unions, and instead of sitting down and discussing things in a proper way, they've dragged it out in an attempt to vilify people who are withdrawing rightfully their labour, because they're not just striking about pay, they're striking about conditions and the collapse of the National Health Service, and highlighting, for instance, the ambulance service and on the wards, how the lack of money is hindering the proper use of the money that we have. Anyway,
and of course recruitment's a problem. If the pay's not great, you can't get people, and you're losing staff.
And then retention is a problem. So that's what they're doing. I think the problem was that Pat Callan asked for 19%, and it kind of raised the hopes of the nurses. And so when they wanted to settle, when she wanted them to settle, they wouldn't settle. And this to me shows the depths of feeling that the nurses have. They really do feel very, very strongly about this. And we shouldn't have allowed it to get to this stage. But, the thing is, the rail strikes could have been solved last summer, for God's sake. Grant Shapps was then, I think he was then Transport Minister, wasn't he?
Yep, he was.
Yep.
Transport
and he refused to sit down with them. It's because they kick it down the road, so that, for instance, if they'd settled last summer, then they've had to pay the rises until now. So they're saving the rises. They've had a whole year where nobody's done anything.
Well, I suppose they're worried about a wage spiral, inflation, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Lord Taylor, this is also a U-turn from Pat Cullen, the nurses' union leader. It's a mess, this, isn't it?
It is a mess, and the government is worried about inflation. It feels if it gives, this to the nurses, everybody else will want a pay rise. And we're in a cost of living crisis at the moment. More and more money has been put into the NHS, but it's like pouring water into a leaking jug. The whole system, needs looking at. We're living longer. We want more from the NHS. Living to 100 now is nothing, really. So it's putting more demands on the NHS. I put in a parliamentary question recently to the government saying, look, isn't it time that you use ACAS? ACAS is the body that is the intermediary to bring the parties together. The government's reply to me was, we don't feel it's the right time for ACAS.
So they're stalling, aren't they?
And what do you think is behind that decision?
I think it's because the fear that ACAS may actually side more with the nurses, and then it puts pressure on all the other unions who want more from the government.
Are these strikes morally unjustified? I hate to sound like woke Welby, but the fact that patients are likely to be impacted, that lives may be lost...
Well, I'm afraid you say likely, people are dying. Cancers are not being detected. There's no question. There is a moral...
Appointments are being delayed or cancelled.
People are dying because the ambulance service is in such a state that people are getting... They're calling and then they're waiting hours.
Well, then don't go on strike.
Well, no.
You chose the wrong job to down tools.
No, they have to highlight the inadequacies of the system.
But there are certain jobs where you don't go on strike. The military, the police, and surely medical professionals should be in that category.
No, I don't think so.
I think it is morally unjust. You shouldn't be able to strike in these positions. But can I just whenever we talk about the strikes in the NHS, it comes back to the bigger picture of this out-of-control organisation needs massive, massive reform. And it's not about lack of money. There's plenty of money going in there, far too much. It needs a complete reform, but nobody's courageous enough to do it.
There you go. Well, look, also, we've got that story, that recurring story based upon my big opinion, Lord Taylor. Outrage over Labour plan to reopen Brexit. The idea of granting the votes to up to 6 million EU nationals who live in the United Kingdom, who have settled status. The moment they can vote in local elections, this would be to vote in a general election. Would that kill off the Tory party for good?
Well, it's not only about EU migrants, it's also 16-year-olds.
Yep.
Keir Starmer is thinking about giving them the vote, and we know why that is, because they think that a 16-year-old is more likely to vote for Labour than the Conservatives. You know, it's so cynical. But, you know, ideas fly or die. And I think he's flying a kite. He's seeing the reaction, and I think this will die.
What about the 16 to 17-year-olds? Do you think he'll persist with that? Because that's the law in Scotland now.
But you see, I think he might be misjudging the position, because 16-year-olds may want to vote for the Greens or other small parties, not just Labour.
Yeah. He might be the turkey that's voting for Christmas.
Exactly.
I mean, would you grant the vote to 16 or 17-year-olds?
No, I mean, the fact...
What's the problem with 16 to 17-year-olds? They're very grown up these days.
Well, it depends, isn't it? I mean, you know, you can't drive at 16, you can't drink alcohol at 16, and you can't marry at 16. Now, it could well be an individual 16-year-old is more mature than an 18-year-old, but you have to have the cut-off at some point. And bearing in mind you can't drive, marry or drink alcohol at 16, no to the vote.
Although, what about the idea, Nina, that if you let 16-year-olds vote, they'll be more engaged with politics?
I think they should be more engaged with politics, and I think we should make the vote, we should make it compulsory. I think, like in Australia, it is compulsory to vote, and that you know, and you're fined if you don't vote, and it actually must engage the brain.
You know, Nina, Nina, you want to ban smoking, you want to force us to vote. You're getting very dictatorial.
No, I'm not getting dictatorial. I'm just saying, if you want people to be citizens and to vote, then you make it compulsory, because then they'll have to think about it, because too often they don't think about it.
But isn't not voting also a human right?
I would say it is, yeah. Because some people protest against the system by not voting. In fact, many of us...
It's a vote in itself.
It's a vote in itself.
Well, then you can do that and pay the fine.
OK, well, look, I tell you something. Let me tell you, we've got some very big stories coming up. We've got the Times and we've got the Sun. And it's another very big Philip Schofield story. Now, at the top of the hour, if you're just joining us, I've made an extraordinary offer to ITV. No one wants the excruciating horror of Holly and Phil sat next to each other on the sofa of This Morning, Tomorrow Morning. I've spoken to my bosses, cleared it with them, the best management team in the country, and they've said I can go to ITV tomorrow and present that show. I'm ready to do it, but we'll bring reaction to not just that story, but a couple of other issues around Philip Schofield. All of that is next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Are authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime? With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Are nursing unions right to threaten to go on strike until Christmas? Don't forget, it's just mid-May at the moment. Even GB News panel members, says Paul, don't talk about the suicidal increase in demand. At least 10 million people came into the UK over the last 2 decades. Of course, the capacity supply cannot cope. The figure I'd heard was 7 million, Paul, but of course we can debate that. But thank you for your email. Rod, Mark, please tell the 2 idiots on your panel all other unions have accepted the offer to the nurses. The RCN is a relatively small outlier. Bridget, Mark, I've spoken to you before about the waste of money by health authorities. That affects staff pay. I have a friend who's a retired nursing sister. She doesn't agree with the RCN on this. WHO, should they be defunded? They're talking about teaching 4-year-olds about the sexuality of their body and their gender. Hi, Mark, as Donald Trump says, the WHO must be defunded, says Anthony, and terminated ASAP. They're an immoral agent and dangerous authoritarians. Do not give them any more money. Peter's not sure about Reform UK as the future of conservatism. Too wordy, too woolly, not a chance. And I've made an exclusive offer to ITV to present this morning, tomorrow. I'm going to steady the ship. It's been cleared with the bosses here. Of course, I'll be committed to my duties on GB News every Friday, Saturday and Sunday, but I'm there should I be required. A big reaction online. Hi, Mark, ITV should take you up on your offer, but you have to wear that tie. Love GB News, says Catherine. Susan, no, Jeff says, I'm 100% behind you. I'm sure that ITV will take you up on your offer. If not, they are silly. Go, Mark, go, says Jeff. And last but not least, should stay-at-home mums get tax breaks? Yes, says Susan. I believe that for the first 5 years of a child's life, mums should be at home looking after their children. I don't get having a child, then farming them out to strangers to bring them up. My own mother brought me up. She went back to work when I started primary school. She was always there when I arrived home from school. Children used to be called latchkey kids if they went home to an empty house. Susan, thank you for that. I've got no doubt your mother did an excellent job. Let's have a look now at some of the other papers. And we've got the Times newspaper. They lead with, Britons will forget how to work, says Braverman. The government must reduce immigration before the general election because Britain has become too dependent on foreign labour. This according to the Home Secretary. And Erdogan on the brink as both sides dispute Turkish voting. The presidential elections continue apace in Turkey, and we'll bring you more on that in our bulletin with Tatiana in just over 10 minutes' time. And next, we've got the big showbiz story of the year in the Sun newspaper. TV return today. Furious Phil calls in lawyer. Blimey, I hope he wasn't watching my take at 10. Let's have a look at the detail here. Philip Schofield has hired a lawyer to help him in the This Morning fallout with Holly Willoughby. Insiders say he wanted to take back control after being blindsided by how public the tensions with Holly had become. They will return on ITV tomorrow after vowing their rift would not escalate. Well, there you go. Star taking back control in Holly feud. And Lord Taylor, this Philip Schofield story raises an interesting question, doesn't it? They're going to be back on telly tomorrow. It's going to be tense, it's going to be awkward, but the show must go on. Do you need to get on with your colleagues to do a good job?
In the good book, Matthew 5, verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers. So
There's none of those at ITV.
For the greater good, you have to. Even when you've got differences, what you have to do in this situation, Phil and Holly should think, OK, we disagree on 2 or 3 things, but we agree on the rest. Let's park the things we disagree on and just for the greater good. Blessed are the peacemakers.
Do you think they need to address it? Do they need to talk about the elephant in the room when they start?
I think, they need to look at the greater good, park whatever it is. They've had 14 years together, so it obviously has worked for 14 years. Philip Schofield was the best thing since sliced bread. Now he's toast, according to Nina. But Everyone's going to be watching tomorrow. The ratings are going to sky high. ITV will be
Well, I've
pleased.
got big news for you.
We've fallen for the
back
trap.
to me, Alistair, because this is important, because actually, really bad news for this morning, which is I don't think they're going to be smart enough to accept my offer to present the show for charity for Help for Heroes. But the offer stands. My phone will be on overnight. Television is 24/7, as you know. But their ratings will not be great tomorrow. And that's because they are up against Bev and Andrew. That's right, Beverly Turner, Andrew Pearce. To the point, it is the best show on breakfast TV, of course, picking up the baton from Eamon and Isabel. But I cannot wait to be watching that show tomorrow. That's GB News, and it's Bev and Andrew dropping those truth bombs, not lying to you like mainstream media. OK, now listen, you come from, first of all, you work in training, motivational speaking, Adrian, and you've served in the forces as well. Do you need to get on with colleagues or not?
There's an invisible energy. Have you ever been to a dinner party where a couple are not getting on? You can all feel it. And it's the same with presenters on TV. There's that energy that feeds off each other. And when it works on fire. I like Pearce and Maguire. What a great couple! What a great couple of guys!
They're great because they're different.
They're different. But they have banter. And I think Holly and Phil. I don't really care. I think we're celebrity obsessed in this country. But I might actually tune in tomorrow just to watch myself to see the energy.
Yeah, tune away briefly from Bev and Andrew,
and
and come straight back to it. And here's the thing: I do prefer Bev and Andrew to Holly and Phil because it's real, and that's what this place hopefully is all about, Nina. But you know, showbiz. A lot of these stars don't get on. They just pretend brilliantly that they do.
That's absolutely true. Actually, there's a very funny movie you can look at called Ron Burgundy, which is a Will Ferrell movie,
Classic
which is
film.
Set back
The
in the
Anchorman,
70s.
yeah.
Anchorman thing. It is hilarious, and that really epitomises a couple who loathe each other who are presenting the news. It must be, but on a daily basis, if you're on air hour after hour, 5 days a week with somebody, it must be hell if you really don't like them. But you can overcome things. But on the other hand, if you like somebody and you work together, there is a different energy. It is,
and it's a bit more positive.
Yes.
But you've seen it in rock music, that you've got bands like the Kinks, Oasis, Pink Floyd, at war with each other, but when they're on stage and when they're in the studio, they make magic.
Yes, but then there'll come a point where it'll all go...
But then when you look at Coldplay, and they all, they go back to their sort of teens and they really get on well. And
they get on too well.
You can feel it with them.
No, absolutely. I agree.
And also,
it's
you
such
get
a
these
shame.
comedy double acts that don't get on. That's quite a common thing, isn't it? I'm trying to think. I think Morecambe and Wise were pretty close.
Yes, they were.
But I think... Little and Large as well, but there was one double act, I think, that were particularly cantankerous with each other. And but of course, a lot of it is showbiz fakery. Well, look, we all get on, don't we? And we're about to nominate your preferred options here. Now, I'm very excited. Back to me. Can you please concentrate, Alistair? I know it's Sunday. Listen, no, very excited because I've got to say that our bosses and my brilliant producer Greg and myself, we came up with this idea of the headline heroes and the back page zeros. OK, we think it's a good item. I'll be honest, it's very similar to Dan Wootton's Greatest Britains and Union Jackasses. And every time we do the item, Dan does get paid £11.50 every time we use it, and rightly so. He's got the IP. But listen, Dan's back tomorrow at 9. No, we love it. But anyway, I've been calling it front page headline heroes and back page baddies. Well, we got an email from Scott, and he said it should be back page zeros because it rhymes with heroes. Yeah. The people have spoken. You decided you love it, so that's what it's called. So well done, Scott, and thank you for helping make the show better. And can I ask you, please, Nina, to give me the headline hero?
My headline hero is Dame Sharon White, who's the boss of John Lewis. Wonderful British institution, wonderful British company, which has suffered a great deal of financial loss last year. This week, she managed to get all the partners to agree to go forward with her plan, and she has promised that the partnership will remain. And this is the whole ethos of John Lewis, that every employee is a partner.
You own a chunk of the business.
And you own a chunk of the business. So, and that makes for, greater efficiency, wonderful service, great loyalty, and it's a very British thing, and good on her.
I completely agree. I love John Lewis, and we must not let it fall.
Go Shazza.
Yeah, go Shazza, exactly. Team Shazza. She's looking after a national treasure. Let's hope she can preserve it. Adrian, your headline hero.
My hero is Dr. Asim Malhotra. He's been on the show. He is continually pushing. He's been pushing against the circulatory damage of vaccines, but he's also now pushed it on statins and showing how the harmful side effects of statins and that they don't work. The big theme of it, whether it's vaccines, lockdowns, net zero, climate change, is follow the money. And he's exposing against the system, not single-handedly, but really pushing up against it.
Now, of course, mainstream majority medics would say that the statins save lives, but what's important is that we debate this, and I love Asim Malhotra.
Yeah.
He is a cardiologist, and he challenges the narrative, and I've got to say I agree with more than I don't when it comes to Asim. How about you, Lord Taylor, your hero?
My headline hero is Margaret Shepherd. She's a nurse. I was at the Global Nursing Awards at the QE2 on Friday, and she won the top prize out of 52,000 nurses from 202 nations because she's doing pioneering work in diabetes research.
Brilliant.
So that's my hero.
We're a huge problem in the country and across the world. Well done, Margaret Shepherd. How about your back page zero?
Well, this seems, I feel almost ashamed to say this because you could use him every week. Donald Trump, because he was convicted of assaulting Eugene Charles, and he came out this week and he called her a total whack job. And this is just...
And what's bizarre about American politics, it might even give him more support.
The ratings have gone up. This is the awful thing. I mean, she's struck a blow for all women, and yet he just continues in this despicable way.
OK, the orange one gets a kicking from Nina Mishkov. How about you briefly, if you can, Adrian?
Very quickly, we've covered the story tonight, but Mr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the Director General of the WHO.
Yeah.
This guy, former terrorist by all accounts, should be sacked. That organisation should be defunded. Finish. We should get out of it.
There you go. Of course, and many would argue he does great work globally for health. Not my view, but there you go. Not Adrian's either. Lord Taylor.
My headline zero is Sir Keir Starmer, who's trying to rig the voting system to give votes to EU migrants because he thinks they'll vote Labour.
There you go. Succinct and brilliant. Can I thank all of my pundits? Really enjoyed your company tonight. Also, my fantastic team all weekend for doing an amazing job. And most importantly, to you for listening and watching. It's been a really busy 3 days, and we're back on Friday at 8 o'clock for 3 hours of fun. And thanks for those emails as well. If you're enjoying the show, if you're enjoying the channel, tell your friends, tell your family, and let's change the world together. Have a great week. I'll see you Friday. Headliners is next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from